Welcome back. This week, the trial of a schoolteacher facing 6 charges of sexual offences started at the Supreme Court. The court heard from the man who accused schoolteacher Mark Montorio of indecently assaulting him when he was a child. Mr. Montorio faces 6 charges of gross indecency and indecent assault dating back to 1997, when the complainant was only 10 years old. The court heard how the alleged victim was dyslexic and had been taken for private lessons to the defendant's house by his parents. The jury also heard how there were other children there during lessons. In his opening statement, Attorney General Ricky Roda QC said it was up to the jury to decide whether the complainant should have had a reason to lie. He said the charges put to the defendant were sample charges representing an alleged conduct over a period of time. The trial continues. Tempers rose in Parliament on Thursday over the arrears owing to the government in respect of unpaid housing rent. Although the figure showed a slight decrease for last month compared with December 2013, something the opposition said it was pleased about, the question prompted animated exchanges between the Chief Minister and the Leader of the Opposition over the present and previous government's record in tackling arrears.
The question, by Shadow Housing spokesman Edwin Regis, seemed innocuous enough. Could the Housing Minister provide updated details of arrears in respect of unpaid rents pertaining to government rental homes since the information was last given in January? The answer, too, seemed non-controversial. The figure was £4.8 million and represented a slight improvement. No problem then? Well, not exactly.
No action has been taken dramatically, in our view, in the past 16 years, in a very large measure, to deal with any of these arrears. And a huge amount, many millions of pounds, are likely to have to be written off in respect of that amount outstanding as a result of the failure to pursue those arrears in the past 16 years before our election.
He says, well, this is all due to the last 16 years of GSD government. But hang on a minute, the Honourable Member has been Chief Minister of Gibraltar for over 2 years now. And is he satisfied that none of these have been statute barred during the time that he was Chief Minister? Has he undertaken that kind of exercise?
Have some amounts had to be written off because we've been in office for 25 months, and on the first month, the first thing we did was not to go to the list of arrears and check what they were and take action? Yes. 25 months have passed, and in some of those 25 months, the 6-year period will have expired, but not 192 months, which was the time that expired under them, and these arrears built up into the incredible figures that we see today.
When he became Chief Minister of Gibraltar, the arrears stood at just over 4 million. The arrears in October 2013 stood at 4.8 million. It's increased by nearly 800,000 in the time that he was Chief Minister of Gibraltar. That's not prudent. That's not prudent management. That's a very high percentage increase. I don't know how he can stand there with a straight face and make some of the points that the honourable gentleman makes.
Does he not realise what he has just exposed himself to? In the 25 months that I have been in office, the arrears have grown by £800,000, he says. Yes. All of it recoverable, because I have only been in office 25 months. Doesn't he realise that that £800,000, which has to be dealt with, which has to be the subject of an attempt to reach an agreement, which has to be the subject of attempted litigation, is all arrears accruing, still recoverable under the Limitation Act? And doesn't he realise that the very large part of the 4 million is what is going to have to be written off because of their lack of diligence in pursuit of these arrears when they were in office in the administration of the affairs of this nation?
The honourable gentleman comes to this House and makes a song and dance saying, because there was so much owing under the GSD administration which is not recoverable, because it's owing for over 6 years. None of what he's actually told me actually allows me to make any kind of assessment, or anybody of any kind of assessment, as to what proportion of the 4 million is statute barred. Now, I would have thought that for a government that makes itself responsible as it must, for the answers, and a Chief Minister that makes himself responsible, for the answers that he gives to this House, And the song and dance that he's made about arrears being owing in the this mismanagement by the GSD of all this money that's not recoverable, that at least he could have said, well, we estimate that it's going to be 2 million or 1 million. But he doesn't even have that information.
But he needs to understand, Mr. Speaker, and I know that he thought that he got us on this one, and I could see his animus when he was coming out with the press release. I've got him. This is the a mí me pertenece culture, which I'm really going to go for. The exercise which relates to these figures, Mr. Speaker, shows that it's cumulative, and it will show, Mr. Speaker, in my view, when the exercise is done, that over 3 million will have to be written off because of their negligence.
The Chief Minister said the government would make a public statement once the exercise was concluded, and that it would not make happy reading for the GSD.
And for the rest of this week's Parliament stories, head over to our website, gbc.gi/news. Now, the Foreign Office said it would be raising at a high level with the Spanish government and issuing a formal protest over the latest incursion into British Gibraltar territorial waters. It happened on Tuesday off Europa Point and involved the Spanish Navy patrol boat Vigía that disrupted a British parachuting exercise.
The incursion by the Serviola-class patrol boat was the most serious in recent weeks, interfering as it did with a British military exercise. The UK has sought to downplay it, noting that the exercise went ahead anyway, but it's described the incident as unlawful and confirmed that it will be protesting to Madrid. HMS Sabre had to break away to escort the Vigía away from the area, with the manoeuvres resuming on her return. When contacted on VHF radio, Vigía reportedly told the Royal Navy she was in Spanish waters, despite her proximity to the rock. After a relatively quiet period, Spanish state vessels appear to have stepped up their activity in Gibraltar waters in recent days, and the Royal Navy also had to issue warnings during several other incursions yesterday. These were carried out by the Guardia Civil and a customs ship. It's also emerged that over the past week, Guardia Civil vessels have approached ships taking on bunkers in local waters, filming and photographing them. The convent says it's aware of and is monitoring this activity, and that protests have been made. Given that the Spanish authorities have the ability to monitor bunkering operations remotely, this would appear to suggest that the Guardia Civil was happy or even wanted to be filmed. The convent has stressed that there's been no attempt by the Guardia Civil to exercise jurisdiction in British waters in recent days, which would have made the incursions even more serious.
And GBC was allowed on board the C-130 Hercules aircraft, which was here this week on the Rock as part of the Royal Navy's Submarine Parachute Assistance Group as they carried out exercises in the Strait of Gibraltar. Well, today we've been given an incredible privilege and literally a bird's eye view of what these guys have to do once they step foot onto that ramp and jump 2,000 feet to the sea below. The walk to the jump. On this relatively cool February morning, 15 members of the Submarine Parachute Assistance Group make their way to the C-130 Hercules, which has been making a lot of noise over the past few days. In the late 60s, the Royal Navy identified the need for a parachute rescue team that could assist submarines in difficulty. They are tasked with rapid deployment and escape and knowledge rescue to provide advice and assistance to the crew of a distressed submarine, survivors on the surface, or any other rescue forces involved in the rescue effort. They are on 6-hour notice to take off 24 hours a day, all year round. And while thankfully they haven't had to jump into action too often in recent months or even years, training exercises can only improve the overall effectiveness of the team. Today, out over the Strait of Gibraltar, members of the local press were given a unique vantage point for today's jump. The members of the Submarine Parachute Assistance Group, or SPAG for short, are trained in water descent parachuting using both round and square static line parachutes. It's certainly not for the faint at heart.
You've obviously got to be prepared to step off the back of the Hercules. You know, as any sort of parachuting is, it's not for the faint-hearted. You know, but what we deliver, if we had to go on a live shout, you know, you're jumping off the back of the aeroplane to provide your fellow submariners with a certain amount of assistance should they need it. And you know, if I was certainly escaping from a submarine and I saw UK SPAG on the surface when I got there, they'd certainly be a friendly face.
It's unfortunately not been without controversy. Of course, there was an issue of a Spanish naval warship in the region. I mean, what do you do when something like that happens?
Primarily, that's not really my concern. All that does to us, it delays the actual exercising process. The Royal Navy that are based here over at Gib Squadron, they deal with what they need to deal with, and all it does, ultimately, we do not step foot out the back of the aircraft until somewhere's safe to land. If it's not a safe drop zone, then we do not jump. The Navy from Gib Squadron will deal with that in the way that they deal with it, and then once it's safe to jump, then we will jump.
The view is breathtaking, and we can only imagine the sensation even more so. But these men are prepared, have trained, and are ready. Notice the amount of equipment on them, not to mention the weight they must be carrying as they drop, and the immediate deployment of their parachutes, and their eventual destination, cold wintry water below. It's an unenviable task, but one very impressive when seen up close, and it goes to show the level of dedication and commitment of these men. This is a training exercise, but just imagine dropping down on a crisis for real. This is continuation training. The climate in this part of the world and the support they receive from the Royal Air Force, the Gibraltar Squadron and the Gibraltar Defence Police all helping towards a productive exercise session. That is, unless the winds play up, which they did during our drop this morning, which meant a few delays. But in the end, all members of the team successfully executed their med drop. Also this week, Chief Inspector Richard Alger was promoted to Superintendent after serving in various departments for 26 years. Warrant Officer Julian Valverde was named the new Regimental Sergeant Major. And 53-year-old IT specialist Anthony Pitaluga was appointed the new Government Archivist. For the rest of this week's news, you can head over to our website at gbc.gi/news. Don't forget to tune into Radio Gibraltar and GBC television throughout the week for the very latest local news. You can also follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. Thank you very much for watching. Good night.